Hello everyone. In this class, we will study the chapter on the rule of the road by A.G. Gardiner. A.G. Gardiner, Alfred. Full name is Alfred George Gardiner. Alfred George Gardiner, 1865. 1865 to 1946. An influential British journalist. British journalist. Editor and author. Wrote under the pen name Alpha of the Plug. Alpha of the Plug. Alpha of the Plug. It's a synonym for the book. He was the editor of the Daily News from 1909 to 1999, during which period he consistently wrote literary pieces that focused on raising awareness for social causes in his unique, elegant, and amusing manner. His distinction of style was in his ability to teach the basic truths of life in an easy and engaging manner. Gardiner's best known collections are Pillar, Pillars of Society, 1913, Pebbles on Pebbles on the Shore, on the Shore, 1916, and Many Furrows, 1924. That why that was a jolly story which Mr. Arthur Ramson told the other day in one of his messages from Petrograd, a place named Russia. Petrograd. This is in Russia. A stout old lady was walking with her basket down the middle of a street in Petrograd, to the great confusion of the traffic and with no small peril to herself. It was pointed out to her that the pavement was the place for foot passengers, but she replied, "I am going to walk where I like. We got liberty now." It did not occur to the dear lady that if liberty entitled the foot passenger to walk down the middle of the road, it also entitled the cab driver to drive on the pavement, and that the end of such liberty would be universal chaos. Everybody would be getting in everybody's else way, and nobody would get anywhere. Nobody would get anywhere because everybody's else way, and everybody would be getting in everybody's else, and nobody would get anywhere. Individual liberty would have become social anarchy. This passage was asked in CSAT of UPSC also. Reading comprehension. Very few years ago. This was important passage. Some passages are asked from here also. There is a danger of the world getting liberty. Drunk in these days, like the old lady with the basket, and it is just as well as remind ourselves of what the rule of the road means. It means it means that in order that the liberty of all may be preserved, the liberties of everybody must be curtailed. When the policeman, say, at Piccadilly Circus steps into the middle of the road and puts in up his hand, he is the symbol not of tyranny, but of liberty. Not for tyranny, but for liberty. You may not think so. You may, being in a hurry and seeing your motor car pulled up by this insolence of office, feel that your liberty has been outraged. How dare this fellow interfere with your free use of the public highway? Then, if you are a reasonable person, you will reflect that if he did not incidentally interfere with you, he would interfere with no one, and the result would be that Piccadilly Circus would be a maelstrom that would never cross at all. You have submitted to a curtailment of private liberty in order that you may enjoy a social order which makes your liberty a reality. ये जो पुलिसमैन आ जा रहा है सड़क के बीच में रोकने के लिए गाड़ी को, वो अत्याचार नहीं कर रहा है, वो सिंबल ऑफ इक्वालिटी है, फ्रीडम का, नॉट ऑफ टायरनी, क्योंकि सबको रोक रहा है। या हो सकता है किसको जल्दी हो जाने का तो थोड़ा फ्रस्ट्रेट भी हो सकता है, लेकिन ये इक्वालिटी के लिए है, रूल्स फॉलो करने के लिए, ना कि टायरनी, अत्याचार नहीं कर रहा वो पुलिस। और ये एक ओल्ड लेडी का जो बास्केट वाला है, ओल्ड लेडी कैरिंग बास्केट, this this compensation was asked in UPSC few years ago. I don't remember the date. I think 2013. This is important comprehension. Liberty is not a personal affair only but a social contract. It is an accommodation of interests in matters which do not touch anybody else. Liberty, of course. I may be as free as I like. If I choose to go down the strand in a dressing gown with a long hair and bare feet, who shall say me nay? You have liberty to laugh at me, but I have the liberty to be indifferent to you. He can ignore them. And if I have a fancy for drying my hair or waxing my moustache, which heaven forbid, or wearing a tall hat, a frock coat and sandals, or going to bed late, or getting up early, I shall follow my fancy and ask no one. No man's permissions. I shall follow my fancy and ask no man's permission. I shall not inquire of you whether I may eat mustard with my mutton. I may like mustard with my mutton, and you will not ask me whether you may be a Protestant or a Catholic, whether you may marry the dark lady or the fair lady, whether you may prefer Ella Wheeler Wilcox to Wordsworth or Champagne to Sandy Gaff. In all this and thousand other details, you and I please ourselves and ask no one's leave. We have a whole kingdom in which we rule alone, can do what we choose, be wise or ridiculous, harsh or easy, conventional or odd. But directly we step out that kingdom, our personal liberty of actions becomes qualified by other people's liberty. I might like to practice on the trombone from midnight till 3 in the morning. Trombone in the midnight till 3 in the morning. If I went on to the top of hell willing to do it, I could please myself. But if I do in my bedroom, my family will object. And if I do it out in the streets, the neighbors will remind me that my liberty to blow the trombone must not interfere with their liberty to sleep in quiet. There are a lot of people in the world, and I have to accommodate my liberty to their liberties. We are all liable to forget this, and unfortunately, we are much more conscious of the imperfections of others in this respect than of our own. I got into a railway carriage at a country station the other morning and settled down for what the schoolboys would call an hour short at a blue book. I was not reading it for pleasure. The truth is that I never do read blue books for pleasure. Blue books is a book which stores some important information, dates, or government rules books. I was not reading it for pleasure. The truth is that I never do read blue books for pleasure. I read them as a barrister reads a brief for the very humble purpose of turning an honest penny out of them. Now, if you are reading a book for pleasure, it doesn't matter what is going on around you. I think I could enjoy Tristram Sandy or Treasure Island in the midst of an earthquake. But when you are reading a thing as you tax, you need reasonable quiet, and that is what I didn't get. For at the next station in came a couple of men, one of whom talked to his friends for the rest of the journey in a loud and pompous voice. He was one of those who remind one of the story of who meeting a person of immense swagger in the street stopped him and said, "Excuse me, sir, but are you someone in particular?" The gentleman was someone in particular. As I wrestled with clauses and sections, his voice rose like a gale, and his family history, the deeds of his sons in the war, and his criticism of the generals and the politicians submerged my poor attempts to hang on to my job. I shut up the blue book, looked out of the window, and listened weirdly. Will the voice thundered on me? Seems themes like this. Now, what French ought to have done? The mistake the Germans made. If only Aquith had, you know the sort of stuff. I had heard it all before, oh so often. I was like a barrel organ, groaning out some banal song of long ago. ये ट्रेन से जब एक बार जा रहे थे तो रेलवे में आज फिर नेक्स्ट स्टेशन में कुछ लोग आ जाते हैं, उसमें से एक लोग है बहुत चिल्ला चिल्ला कर बात करता है, बहुत ज्यादा अपना हिस्ट्री के बारे में बात करता है, बताता है कि उसका बेटा कैसे जंग में लड़ा, उसका वॉरियर्स के बारे में बता रहा है, जैसे स्टोरी बता रहा था। तो वो बुक बंद कर दी और फिर सुनना पड़ा पूरा, फिर खिड़की के बाहर देखने लगे और उनको उनका बात सुनना पड़ा, जो कि वो दूसरों को इफेक्ट कर रहा था वॉइस से। इनको शांति चाहिए था और बुक रीड करने के लिए। If I had asked him to be good enough to talk in a lower tone, I dare say he would have thought I was very rude fellow. अगर ये उसको बोलता कि थोड़ा धीरे बात करो तो उसका नजर में ये बहुत ज्यादा रूड बन जाता। It did not occur to him that anybody could have anything better to do than to listen to him. अब कुछ रास्ता नहीं बचा तो उसको सुनने के अलावा उसको सुनना पड़ा। And I have no doubt he left the carriage convinced that everybody in it had, thanks to him, had a very illuminating journey and would carry away a pleasing impression of his encyclopedic range. Encyclopedic range. He was obviously a well-intentioned person. The thing that was wrong with him was that he had not the social sense. He has not the social sense. He was not a clubbable man. A clubbable man was not a clubbable man. A reasonable consideration for the rights or feelings of others is the foundation of social conduct. It is commonly alleged against women that, in this respect, they are less civilized than men, and I am bound to confess that, in my experience, it is a woman, the well-dressed woman, who thrusts himself to to not to be tolerated from him, but also because he has been better drilled in the small give and take of social relationship. He had lived more in the broad current of the world. When you have to learn to accommodate yourself to the general standard of conduct, and his school life, his club life, and his games have in this respect given him a training that women are only now beginning to enjoy. I believe that the rights of small people and quiet people are as important to preserve as the rights of small nationalities. When I hear the aggressive bullying horn, which some motorists deliberately use, I confess that I feel something boiling up in me, which is very like what I felt when Germany came trampling like a bully over Belgium. By what right, my dear sir, do you go along our highways, uttering that hideous curse on all who impede your path? Cannot you announce you're coming like a gentleman? Cannot you take your turn? Are you someone in particular, or are you simply a hot gospeler of the prophet Nietzsche? I find myself wondering what sort of a person it is who can sit behind that hog like outrage without realizing that he is the spirit of Prussia incarnate and a very ugly spectacle in a civilized world. And there is the more harmless person who has bought a very bla- blatant gramophone and on Sunday afternoon sets the thing going, open the windows and fills the street up with keep the home fires burning or some similarly banality. What are the right limits of social behavior in a matter of this sort? Let us take the trombone as an illustration again. ट्रोम्बोन का एग्जांपल लेंगे. Hazlitt said that a man who wanted to learn that fearsome instrument was entitled to learn it in his own house, even though he was a nuisance to his neighbors. But it was his business to make the nuisance as slight as possible. He must practice in the attic and shut the window. He had no right to sit in his front room, open the window, and blow his noise into his neighbor's ears with the maximum of violence. And so, with my gramophone, if you like my gramophone, you are entitled to have it. But if you are interfering, if you are interfering with the liberties of your neighbors, if you don't do what you can to limit the noise to your own household, your neighbors may not like keep the home fires burning. They may prefer to have their Sunday afternoon undisturbed, and it is as great an impertinence for you to willfully trespass on their peace as it would be to go unasked into their gardens and trample on their flower beds. There are cases, of course, where the clash of liberties seems to defy compromise. My dear old friend X, who lives in a West End square and who is an amazing mixture of good nature and irascibility, flies into a passion when he hears a street piano and rushes out to order it away. But nearby lives a distinguished lady of romantic picaresque tastes who dotes on street pianos and attracts them as Vespre are attached to a jar of jam, whose liberty in this case should surrender to the other. For the life of me, I cannot say it as reasonable to like street pianos as to dislike them, and vice versa. I would give much to hear Sans Panza solution of such a nice riddle. I suppose the fact is that when we can be neither complete anarchists nor complete socialists, neither complete anarchist nor complete socialists. In this complex world, Or rather, we must be a judicious mixture of both. We have both liberties to preserve our individual liberty and our social liberty. We must watch the bureaucrat on the one side and one of the anarchists on the other. I am neither a Marxist nor a Tolstoyan, but a compromise. I shall not permit any authority to say that my child must go to his school, to this school or that, shall specialize in science or arts, shall play rugby or soccer. These things are personal. But if I proceed to say that my child shall have no education at all, that he shall be brought up as a primeval savage or at Mr. Fagan's academy for pickpockets, then society will politely but firmly tell me that it has no use for primeval savages and a very stern objection to pickpockets, and that my child must have a certain minimum of education whether I like it or not. I cannot have the liberty to be a nuisance to my neighbors or make my child a burden and a danger to the commonwealth. In this, no liberty. If I not allow my child to educate to get education and make my child a burden and a danger to the commonwealth. It is in the small matters of conduct, in the observation, of the rule of the road, that we pass judgment upon ourselves and declare that we are civilized or uncivilized. The great movements of heroism and sacrifice are rare. It is the little habits of commonplace intercourse that make up the great sum of life and sweeten or make bitter the journey. I hope my friend in the railway carriage will reflect on this. Then he will not cease, I am sure, to explain to his neighbor where France went wrong and where the Germans went ditto. But he will do it in a way that will permit me to read my blue book undisturbed. Conclusion is the On the Rule of the Road is an interesting and witty prose piece which highlights the importance of striking a balance between liberty of the individual and social restraints. Gardiner argues that unchecked freedom would be disastrous and lead to irresponsible behavior among people, creating chaos for everyone. With the help, his dry matter of fact style of narration and a wide range of examples including real life experiences, the author clearly demonstrates what happens when a person's idea of freedom crosses the limit and interferes into others' rights. In a civilized society, only individuals who understand this idea of well curtailed responsible liberty can survive peacefully and make the world a better place for everyone. Now, starting the MCQs, objective type, fill in the blanks. The prose text On the Rule of the Road is a humorous account of the author's views on which of these traffic rules in London, the controlling of natural government, lack of personal freedom, and social restrictions. The essay explores the delicate balance between the individual's right to do as they please and the necessary limits imposed by society to ensure everyone's freedom and safety. According to Gardiner, everyone would be getting in everybody's else way and nobody would get anywhere. Gardiner argues that if everyone exercised absolute individual liberty without following rules like traffic laws, the resulting chaos would mean that no one could actually achieve their goals or travel anywhere. When the policeman at Piccadilly Circus steps into the middle of the road and puts up his hand, he is a symbol of he is the symbol not of tyranny but of liberty, of tyranny and of liberty, of tyranny not of liberty, of chaos of the road, not of tyranny but of liberty. Although it looks like a restriction, the policeman represents the rule of the road, which actually protects everyone's liberty to move safely by stopping some. He ensures the freedom of movement for all. I might like to practice on the trombone from midnight to till 3 in the morning. What is the example meant to show? An individual desires should always be socially acceptable. An individual is free to do anything. Nobody can stop the individual from playing trombone. An individual may have desires that might not be socially accepted. Which of the following do you think will not be an example of individual liberty? Educating a child in a specific school of choice, sending the child to Fagan's Academy, all of this above. Not educating a child is not be not be an example of individual liberty. Is not an example of individual liberty. Write down in brief life and works of A.G. Gardiner. The full name of A.G. Gardiner was Alfred George Gardiner, who was born in 1865. Was born in 1865. He wrote under a pen name Alpha of the Plug. He wrote under a pen name Alpha of the Plug. Plug. He was the editor of the Daily News, London. He was also the president of the Institute of Journalists. He contributed essays to a number of leading British newspapers. He expresses his natural sense of joy and harmony to his life through his essays. Some of his essays provide shocking details about the First World War. Gardiner naturally inspires the reader to feel that life is beautiful. Gardiner naturally inspires the reader to feel that life is beautiful. He shows effortless ease in giving expression to his ideas. He has the capacity to express something of the universal through his experiences. While reading Gardiners, the reader quickly attunes himself to the moods and feelings of the writer. The essay on superstition shows the spontaneous response of the essayist to matter concerning the ordinary human beings. Gardiner has been able to elevate journalistic writings to the level of literature. His sentences are usually short. We find a series of well-organized short sentences finally connected to relating long ones. He uses learned allusions that harmonize with the style. He follows the style of the natural and intimate con- conversationalist. conversationalist. He shows effortless. His is in expressing his thought. A.G. Gardiner died in 1946. Gardiner died in 1946. Provide a summary of on the rule of the road. A.G. Gardiner humorous. A.G. Gardiner's humorous and witty essay on the rule of the road addresses civic duty, civic duty, and public responsibility. The essay main thesis is that preserving each person's freedom necessities limiting everyone else's freedom is that limiting everyone's each person's freedom necessitates necessitates limiting everyone's else freedom. Liberties are not anarchy or unrestrained freedom. True liberty is defined by A.G. Gardiner, who also explains why it requires some degree of authority. The essay stands out for its simplicity, and many people were likely to read it because of the topic's relevance at the time of publication. When instructed to walk on the pavement, an elderly woman who was wandering aimlessly in the center of the road said that she had the freedom to do as she pleased because she was free. But if that were the case, there would be anarchy on the earth. If everyone was allowed to live as they wished, there would be anarchy since no one would be protected. Therefore, it is imperative that we remember the meaning of the root and not become lost in the concert of liberty. And elderly woman who was wandering aimlessly in the center of road said that said that said she had freedom to do as she pleased because she was free. But if that was case, there but if that was that were the case, there would be anarchy on earth. Enforcing the norms of the road or the laws of the land by way of a police officer is not a sign of dictatorship, but rather of freedom. Will some may think that this kind of law enforcement violates their rights. Any rational person would say that the law enforcement keeps the world somewhat orderly. While some may think that this kind of law enforcement violates their rights, any rational person would see that law enforcement keeps the world somewhat orderly, which in turn promotes real liberty. It is evident that liberty is a social compact that recognizes and accommodates the needs of all people. There are no limitations to be concerned. There are no limitations to be concerned about. 2. If one's action have no bearing on the freedom of others, you don't need any kind of control because your choices about how you dress, how you present yourself, when to sleep, wake up, eat, wash, or practice your religion have no bearing on another person's right or to liberty. But your limitless freedom stops when this is absence. Absence of regulation infringes upon the freedom of another person. It is entirely up to you whether or not you want to learn how to play the trombone. You don't need permission from anyone. However, when what one does is unrelated to anyone else's liberty, then there are no restrictions to worry about. The way you choose to dress or the style in which you choose to portray yourself, or when you sleep, wake up, eat, bath, and what religion you follow are completely irrelevant with regard to another person's liberty, and so does not require any sort of regulations. Yet once this lack of regulations impinges upon someone else's freedom, that is where the line of your restriction-less liberty ends. If you want to learn to play the trombone, it's completely up to you, and you do not require anyone say so. If you practice that trombone in the wee hours of the morning, thereby disturbing family and neighbors, then there is no a problem. Then there is a problem. It is easy to point out mistakes of others when they infringe upon our liberty, but not as easy for us to be conscious of not infringing upon theirs. A civilized person will be civilized in matters both big and small. They will follow the rules of the road and they contribute to the little things that make life for everyone that much sweeter. Consideration for one another is integral to real liberty. एजी गार्डिनर का हास्यप्रद और मजाकिया निबंध ऑन द रूल ऑफ द रोड नागरिक कर्तव्य और सार्वजनिक जिम्मेदारी को संबोधित करता है। निबंध की मुख्य थीसिस यह है कि प्रत्येक व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता को संरक्षित करने के लिए अन्य सभी की स्वतंत्रता को सीमित करना आवश्यक है। स्वतंत्रताएं आज अराजकता या अनियंत्रित स्वतंत्रता नहीं है। सच्ची स्वतंत्रता को एजी गार्डिनर द्वारा परिभाषित किया गया है, जो भी जो यह भी बताते हैं कि इसके लिए कुछ हद तक अधिकार की आवश्यकता क्यों है। निबंध अपनी सादगी के लिए जाना जाता है और प्रकाशन के समय विषय का प्रासंगिकता के कारण कई लोगों द्वारा इसे पढ़ने की संभावना थी। जब फुटपाथ पर चलने का निर्देश दिया गया तो एक बुजुर्ग महिला जो सड़क के बीच में लक्ष्यहीन होकर घूम रही थी ने कहा कि उसे अपनी इच्छा अनुसार काम करने की आजादी है क्योंकि वह स्वतंत्र है। लेकिन अगर ऐसा होता तो पृथ्वी पर अराजकता फैल जाती। यदि सभी को अपनी उनकी इच्छा अनुसार जीने की अनुमति दी गई तो अराजकता फैल जाएगी क्योंकि कोई भी सुरक्षित नहीं रहेगा। इसलिए यह जरूरी है कि हम मार्ग का अर्थ याद रखें और स्वतंत्रता की अवधारणा में खो न जाएं। एक पुलिस अधिकारी के माध्यम से सड़क के मानदंडों या देश के कानूनों को लागू कराना तानाशाही का संकेत नहीं है, बल्कि स्वतंत्रता का संकेत है। जबकि कुछ लोग सोच सकते हैं कि इस प्रकार का कानून प्रवर्तन उनके अधिकारों का उल्लंघन करता है। कोई भी तर्कसंगत व्यक्ति यह देखेगा कि कानून प्रवर्तन दुनिया को कुछ हद तक व्यवस्थित रखता है, जो बदले में वास्तविक स्वतंत्रता को बढ़ावा देता है। यह स्पष्ट है कि स्वतंत्रता एक सामाजिक समझौता है जो सभी लोगों की जरूरत को पहचानती है और उन्हें समायोजित करती है। हालांकि चिंता करने की कोई सीमा नहीं है अगर किसी के कार्यों का दूसरा की स्वतंत्रता पर कोई असर नहीं पड़ता है। आपको किसी भी प्रकार की नियंत्रण की आवश्यकता नहीं है, क्योंकि आप कैसे कपड़े पहनते हैं, अपने आप को कैसे प्रस्तुत करते हैं, कब सोना है, जागना है, खाना है, धोना है या अपने धर्मों का पालन करना है, इस बारे में आपकी पसंद का किसी अन्य व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता के अधिकार पर कोई असर नहीं पड़ता है। लेकिन आपकी असीमित स्वतंत्रता तब रुक जाती है जब विनियमन की यह अनुपस्थिति किसी अन्य व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता का उल्लंघन करती है। यह पूरी तरह आप पर निर्भर है कि आप ट्रोम्बोन बजाना सीखना चाहते हैं या नहीं। आपको किसी से अनुमति की आवश्यकता नहीं है। हालांकि जब कोई व्यक्ति जो करता है उसका किसी और की स्वतंत्रता से कोई लेना देना नहीं है, तो चिंता करने की कोई आवश्यकता नहीं है। आप जिस तरह से कपड़े चुनते हैं या जिस शैली में आप खुद को चित्रित करना चुनते हैं, या जब आप सोते हैं, जागते हैं, खाते हैं, स्नान करते हैं और आप किसी धर्म का पालन करते हैं, यह किसी अन्य व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता के संबंध में पूरी तरह से उपांसंगिक है और इसलिए इसकी आवश्यकता नहीं है किसी भी प्रकार का विनियम। फिर भी एक बार जब विनियम की यह कमी किसी और की स्वतंत्रता पर प्रभाव डालता है तो यही आपकी प्रतिबंध रहित स्वतंत्रता की रेखा समाप्त हो जाती है। अगर आप ट्रोम्बोन बजाना सीखना चाहते हैं, यह पूरी तरह आप पर निर्भर है और आपको किसी के कहने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। यदि आप सुबह के समय उस ट्रोम्बोन का अभ्यास करते हैं जिससे परिवार और पड़ोसियों को परेशानी होती है, तो एक समस्या है। जब दूसरे हमारी स्वतंत्रता का उल्लंघन करते हैं तो उनकी गलतियों को इंगित करना आसान होता है, लेकिन उनकी गलतियों का उल्लंघन न करने के प्रति सचेत रहना हमारे लिए उतना आसान नहीं है। एक सभ्य व्यक्ति छोटे और बड़े दोनों मामलों में सभ्य रहेगा। वे सड़क के नियमों का पालन करेंगे और वे उन छोटी छोटी चीजों में योगदान देंगे जो हर किसी के जीवन को और अधिक मधुर बनाती है। एक दूसरे का ख्याल रखना वास्तविकता स्वतंत्र का अभिन्न अंग है। डिस्कस द सिग्निफिकेशन ऑफ its टाइटल, द रूल ऑफ द रोड। द रूल ऑफ द रोड। What does Gardiner mean by this rule, and how does it apply to both literal and metaphorical interpretations within the essay? Through the metaphor of the road, A.G. Gardiner's essay, A.G. Gardiner's essay, The Rule of the Road, examines the themes of decency, decency, cooperation, and social norms. And social norms. The title itself has several layers of meaning that are essential to comprehending Gardiner's message, both literally and figuratively. The rule of the road literally refers to the set of rules and legislation governing movement and traffic on roadways. Gardiner discusses the significance of abiding by these laws for public safety and orderly behavior. Using this literal meaning, he underlines that in order to preserve order and harmony in society, people must abide by social norms and conventions, just as drivers must follow traffic laws to avoid confusion and accidents. Practically speaking, the rules of the road include concern for other people, politeness, and respect. It entails knowing the expectations to promote easy contact and mobility in public areas, obeying signals and speeding when appropriate. Gardner uses metaphor to expand the meaning of rule of the road beyond specific driving laws to include more general social conventions and manners. He contends that social interactions are governed by unwritten standards or rules much like traffic laws. These include being courteous, taking into account the sentiments of others, and adhering to social norms. The figurative interpretation emphasizes how crucial civility and collaboration are in social relationships. According to Gardiner, following these unspoken guidelines promotes a sense of belonging and respect for one another, both of which are necessary for a healthy society. It averts disputes and miscommunications and fosters a peaceful social atmosphere. He places a strong emphasis on each individual accountability for following the law, both literally and figuratively. People are accountable for their behavior in public and on the roads, and by following the law, they promote social justice and order. The phrase "the rule of the road" emphasizes the idea that unity and order are fostered by conformity to conventions and rules, whether they are cultural expectations or actual traffic laws. It represents Gardiner conviction that respect for another, cooperation, and a common commitment to upholding these values are the foundation of cohesive community. Gardiner emphasizes characteristics of human interaction and behavior that are universal by utilizing the metaphor of the road. People use roads as a microcosm of society, using them to guide their actions will keeping others in mind. The essay challenges reader to examine their behavior and the effects that their choices may have on other people. The rule of the road is essentially A.G. Gardiner's philosophical investigation of social behavior and human connections. The title encourages readers to embrace civility, cooperation, and responsible behavior in their daily lives by asking them to consider the similarities between actual traffic laws and more general social values. Gardiner highlights how crucial politeness and civility are in social situations. He contends that observing social customs and norms promotes peace and respect for one another in the community. The essay emphasizes how important it is to work together and show people consideration. According to Gardiner, following social norms fosters harmony among people and reduces conflict. Gardiner talks how being orderly and following the law are important in society at large as possible, as at large as well as on the road. He contends that adhering to the rules ensures order and prevent chaos. The article places a strong emphasis on each person's obligation to respect social norms and support social order. Gardiner emphasizes the significance of individuals' responsibility and integrity in upholding a healthy society. Gardiner utilizes the road as a metaphor to represent relationships between people and the larger journey of life. People use the road as a microcosm, navigating their own pathways while keeping others in mind. The essay "The Rule of the Road" by A.G. Gardiner delves into the age-old concepts of courtesy, collaboration, and individual accountability within the community. These concepts may be seen in ChatGPT's development, design, and interaction, ensuring that it complies with moral principles and fosters a favorable user experience. In "The Rule of the Road", A.G. Gardiner provides a thoughtful and frequently amusing examination of social conventions and human behavior as seen via the prism of driving ethic. Gardiner is a skilled roadside observer who draws attention to the differences in people conduct in public and private settings, he observes that while driving, people follow laws and customs that they might not in other social situations. This observation emphasizes how context dependent and frequently influenced external factors like laws and regulations are. When it comes to societal norms, Gardiner offers a humorous and incisive assessment of the disparities in driving etiquette. He makes the point that while being polite to strangers on the road, drivers may act irritated or disrespectful in other social situations. This critique emphasizes the intricate relationship that exists between society norms and individual conduct, implying that social pressures or perceived consequences may have an impact on how strictly regulations are followed. Gardiner makes the case that norms and regulations are crucial to preserving social order and decorum. He highlights that following traffic laws represent larger ideas of social duty and respect for others in addition to ensuring safety on the road. Gardiner explores topics of power relations and control and social hierarchy as he digs into the psychological implications of driving and being driven. Based on their roles as drivers or passengers, he studies how people may exhibit authority or submissiveness, which is a reflection of deeper psychological motivations and societal roles. This analysis clarifies the subconscious forces that mold people's action in routine and in important contexts. Gardiner uses irony and comedy throughout the essay to highlight the inconsistencies and ridiculousness of human behavior. He offers sharp comments on human nature and society conventions while entertaining reader with clever observations and humorous anecdotes. In addition to capturing the audience attention, this rhetorical strategy encourages contemplation on the difficulties of navigating social interactions and the complexity of human nature. A.G. Gardiner's account of social conventions and human conduct in The Rule of the Road demonstrates his perceptive observation, criticism of social graces, and support of the role that rules play in upholding civility and order. Gardiner encourages readers to consider two subtleties of human behavior and the dynamic interplay between personal conduct and society expectations in day-to-day living. Through comedy and astute insight, his essays examinations of ageless subjects like psychology, manners, and the social compact that regulated interpersonal relationships makes it relevant today. Gardiner draws attention to the absurdities and contradictions in people's conduct when driving by using observational wit. He might, for instance, describe how a normally courteous person suddenly becomes agitated and starts honking loudly and breaking traffic uh, laws. This comparison offers a light-hearted observation on how social norms might change based on the driving environment as opposed to the social context. Gardiner emphasizes the peculiarities and eccentricities of drivers and pedestrians by exaggerating and making fun of them. He might overstate the annoyance of vehicles, traffic jammed vehicles on the overly polite behavior at crosswalks. This method highlights deeper truths about human behavior and the social dynamics at work in public settings, while also entertaining readers. Gardiner uses irony to highlight inconsistencies between his declared principles and real actions. While driving, he might talk about how drivers say that they follow the rules of safety and courtesy, but when there are delays or traffic jams, they swiftly break these rules. This irony highlights the discrepancy between what society expects of people and what they actually do, which makes readers consider how difficult it can be to navigate social conventions. Beyond just driving, Gardiner's satire often targets broader social mores and customs. He might make fun of social norms pertaining to manners or politeness, showing how these standards can be selectively followed or disregarded based on convenience or mood. Readers are challenged to think critically about society conventions and the fundamental causes of human behavior. By this humorous analysis, Gardiner emphasizes the contradicting contradictory aspect of driving behavior with amusing tales and paradoxes. He might relate comical stories of drivers acting irrationally or in an unusual manner, highlighting the absurd aspects of human frailty and unpredictability of social relationships. In addition to providing reader with entertainment, AG Gardner's use of sarcasm and comedy and the rule of the road encourages critical thought on the contradictions present in human nature. Gardiner offers reader a chance to reflect in their own acts and the demands of society by illustrating these inconsistencies through humor and satire. This allows readers to gain this allows readers to gain an understanding of the challenges managing social interactions in everyday life as well as with traveling. Discuss the metaphorical significance of the road in the Gardiner's essay. How does Gardiner use the concept of the road to convey broader societal expectations and norms? Provide examples from the essay to support your discussion. The road is used as a metaphor in A.G. Gardiner's essay, The Rule of the Road, to provide readers with a clearer understanding of societal expectation. So, societal standards and expectations. Gardiner compares the journey of life itself to the road. He contends that people in society must find their way while abiding by the laws and conventions, much like drivers must negotiate hazards and difficulties on the road. The road represents a common area where people with various interests and backgrounds come together. It stands for the area where people come together to engage and coexist, necessitating collaboration and respect for one another. Social norms and expectations give interactions between people structure and order, just like traffic laws do an actual road. Gardiner stresses that following these guidelines is crucial to averting disruption and guaranteeing peaceful partnership. He makes a clear comparison between social norms and expectations of the regulations of the road. The rules of the road are typical of social life. The author argues they represent a social compromise because they were raised by custom and general agreement. He illustrates how commitment to social standards promotes politeness and cooperation with antecedents. He talks about the value of showing other respect and abstaining from actions that upset societal harmony. For example, he uses the metaphor of the road to criticize actions like being impolite and self-centered. He contends that these actions cause conflict and friction, upsetting the normal course of social relationship. In numerous instances, Gardiner use of the road metaphor to illustrate broader cultural standards and expectations in beneficial. Just as traffic laws keep the street orderly, society norms set expectations for appropriate behavior in social situations similar to how drivers must yield and give way on the road. The metaphor highlights the necessity for the people to work together and take into account and the need and rights of others. Gardiner emphasizes how each person has a personal obligation to preserve social values and promote harmony in society. This illustrates the notion that everyone contributes to keeping society operating smoothly. To sum up, A.G. Gardiner's article, The Rule of the Road, highlights and illustrates larger society standards and expectations through the metaphor of the road. Gardiner emphasizes the value of civility, cooperation, and accountability in interpersonal and communal interactions by drawing a comparison between traffic laws and social norms. The road metaphor is a patent tool for communicating these timeless ideas and inspires readers to consider their own social rules. The road is used as a metaphor in the A.G. Gardiner's essay, The Rule of the Road, to go deeper into ideas surrounding social conventions, acts, and relationships. The road represents life's path metaphorically. Gardiner utilizes it to illustrate the idea that life is a journey made up of decisions, difficulties, and social connections. People navigate their path through life, meeting different possibilities and problems along the way, much like drivers transverse a road. The road represents a common area where individuals from many backgrounds congregate. It stands for the area of agreement where people interact with one another. People in society have to live and work together while abiding by certain norms and customs, much like driver on the road. In the some way that traffic laws control how cars can move on the road, cultural standards and expectations control how people behave. Gardiner highlights how crucial these laws are to upholding harmony in interpersonal interaction, overting turmoil, and preserving order. Gardiner makes a clear comparison between social norms and expectations and traffic laws. He contends that societal standards are critical to preserving social harmony and order, much as traffic laws are to ensure the safe and efficient operations of traffic. He argues the laws of the road are typical of social life. For instance, they represent a social compromise because they were raised by custom and general agreement. Gardiner illustrates how commitment to social norms promotes civility, cooperation, and mutual respect among persons. Through stories and examples, he addresses actions that promote a peaceful social atmosphere, serving as bending down together to other, refraining from being impolite and honoring others' rights. Gardiner uses the road metaphor to call out actions like being obnoxious and self-centered. He contends that these practices obstruct social relationship in the same way that carelessly driving obstructs traffic on a road. Gardiner contends that in order to preserve social cohesiveness, people should behave sensibly and thoughtfully. The metaphor emphasizes how important structure and order are in social interactions. Social norms establish a framework for appropriate behavior in social contexts, just like traffic laws do the same in creating a predictable environment on the roads. Gardiner emphasizes how each person how has a personal obligation to respect social norms and make a constructive contribution to the community. This illustrates the notion that via their deeds and relationships, all people contribute to upholding social peace and order. Through highlighting the road as a communal area, Gardiner encourages people to work together as a team. The metaphor challenges readers to think about how their actions affect other people and work toward respect and understanding between all parties. The road is metaphorically used in A.G. Gardiner's essay, The Rule of the Road, to examine and illustrate broader concerns pertaining to social conventions, behavior, and relationships. The road metaphor is a patent tool for communicating the value of decency, accountability, and teamwork in interpersonal and group dynamics. It invites readers to evaluate how they fit into society and how their activities affect their peace and general well-being of their neighborhood. A.G. Gardiner skillfully uses observations and antecedents in The Rule of the Road to highlight his ideas regarding social norms and human behavior. By putting his arguments in the context of real relevant situations, Gardiner use of tales attracts readers. He might, for example, describe a particular traffic event in which a driver actions highlight a larger social trend or paradox. This tale These tales convince reader of the veracity of his observation by drawing their attention and providing a physical memorial example of abstract ideas. Gardiner offers perceptive views that shed light on human nature and behavior. He might watch how different drivers behave based on the situation they are in or how they perceive their standing. Gardiner uncovers underlying motives, social dynamics, and psychological characteristics that impact behavior in social settings and on the road. By meticulously choosing and evaluating these observations, Gardiner illustrates the inconsistencies and contradictions in society norms through antecedents, and he might discuss how, for instance, a driver claim to follow the laws of kindness and safely, but they quickly break these standards when there is heavy traffic or a deadline to meet. These drawings draw attention in the discrepancy between stated values and actual action, which encourages readers to consider both their own behavior and expectations from society. Gardiner makes his observation amusing while also delivering deeper themes. by incorporating comedy and satire into his antecedents to highlight the ridiculously of driving conduct. He can inflate circumstances or use irony. In addition to lightening the mood, this hilarious approach invites readers to reflect on the underlying societal conventions and dynamics that influence day-to-day interaction. Gardiner uses tales for more than just storytelling. He uses them to express social commentary and critical thought. Every story is selected with care to emphasize a certain facet of human behavior or social standard, challenging readers to reevaluate their own beliefs and attitudes. The observations and antecedents and his anecdotes in The Rule of the Road resonate with readers in a variety of cultural and geographic situations due to their universal appeal. Through the portrayal of human behavior in everyday contexts, like traffic jams, Gardiner promotes empathy and self-reflection, while enabling a more comprehensive comprehension of societal dynamics. The insights and tales that A.G. Gardiner includes in The Rule of the Road are perceptive and powerful. He skillfully displays his views about society standards, human conduct, and their inconsistencies. Using these narrative tactics through the use of wit, humor, and critical analysis, Gardiner invites readers to reflect on their own roles in creating upholding social standards, as well as to engage in a true exploration of the intricacies of social interactions. What is the metaphorical significance of the rule of the road? Significance of the road in A.G. Gardiner's essay. The road metaphor has a lot of symbolic meaning in A.G. Gardiner's essay, The Rule of the Road, since it allows Gardiner to delve deeper into society, conventions, and issues. Society issues. The road is a representation of society's organized order. Similar to how traffic laws regulated how cars should pass each other to guarantee safe and easy travel, social norms and regulations specify how people should conduct themselves to preserve peace and order. He discusses morality and ethical behavior. Morality and ethical behavior. Using the road as an example, respecting the traffic laws is a metaphor for upholding moral values and ethical norms when interacting with other people. Just as every person in society is accountable for their behavior toward others, so too is every driver on the road. As a result, the road starts to represent personal accountability and responsibility. People must negotiate their routes through the road while keeping others' right and safety in mind. This illustrates the harmony between individual interests and the greater good, emphasizing the concepts of collaboration and dispute resolution. The road is a metaphor for life's journey with all of its ups and downs, obstacles and social interactions. Making decisions, confronting challenges, and navigating the road are all metaphors for navigating one's life route and engaging with others passengers. The road metaphor is a universal one that works in all eras and civilizations. It addresses the universal themes of social interactions, morality, order, and responsibility that apply in a variety of situations. What does Gardiner suggest about the importance of rules in